My name is Mira Kessler Alden, and I was 35 the night my mother-in-law told 200 people I had married her son for money. We were inside the Harrington Glass House, under a ceiling of white lights and hanging ivy, at Vivian and Arthur Alden's 40th anniversary charity gala. My husband, Graham, stood 6 feet away from me in a black tuxedo and stared at the floor while his mother held the microphone like she was giving a blessing. "You came here empty-handed, Mira, and somehow you still think you're owed a seat," Vivian said, and a few people actually laughed because they thought it was a joke. My marriage was on display. My name was printed wrong on the place card at table 12, and the cobalt-beaded clutch in my lap had a broken clasp digging into my palm. Inside that clutch was my phone, and on that phone was something Vivian had forgotten she ever gave me. I did not cry, and I did not defend myself from my chair. By the end of that night, the people who had smiled through her speech would stop looking at me and start looking at her. That is the part people always ask about first. They want to know what was on the recording. They want to know why I waited so long. They want to know if I planned to play it before I walked through those glass doors. The honest answer is more complicated than revenge. I did not go there wanting to ruin Vivian Alden. I went there because I was still married to her son, and because some foolish, tired part of me thought there might be a limit. A line even Vivian would not cross in public. A place where Graham would finally put his hand on my back and say, "That's enough, Mom." I had been wrong about limits before. The gala was called a Ruby Night for the Arts. The invitations were thick cream cardstock with raised red lettering, the kind Vivian pretended not to know about while checking the spacing 3 times. Her face and Arthur's were printed on the inside flap beside the words legacy, generosity, and family. My name appeared on the seating chart as Mira Kessler, not Mira Alden, not Mrs. Graham Alden, not even Mira Kessler Alden, which was the name on my driver's license, my tax returns, and the emergency paperwork Vivian had once begged me to prepare. Just Mira Kessler. I noticed it before dinner. I did not mention it. I had learned that in that family, small insults were often bait. If you reacted, they called you sensitive. If you stayed quiet, they called you cold. So I stood beside Graham while photographers took pictures of his mother, and I let my thumb rest over the repaired silver clasp of my clutch. Vivian saw it. Her eyes dropped to it, just for a second. Cobalt beads. Silver clasp. Not designer, not borrowed from a stylist. It had belonged to my Aunt Ruth, who carried it to church weddings and office parties until the lining tore near the pocket. She gave it to me when I opened my own accounting practice and said, "Every woman needs one thing in her closet that doesn't apologize." Vivian tilted her head and smiled. "Sweet bag," she said, "very you." Graham squeezed my elbow, the way he did when he wanted me to let something pass. Then his sister, Celeste, floated over in a satin dress the color of oyster shells and kissed the air near my cheek. "Mira," she said, "you made it wonderful. Just remember, tonight isn't about spreadsheets." I had not mentioned spreadsheets. I had not mentioned money. I had not said a word about the foundation, vendors, payroll, donors, or the folder Marisol had handed me before I left my office. That detail stayed with me. At table 12, I sat between an orthodontist's wife and an art dealer who called Graham Gray, even though no one else did. Vivian placed us far enough from the head table that I could see the back of Graham's neck when he stood with his parents, but not close enough for anyone to mistake me for important. The first toast was sweet. Arthur spoke too softly and thanked everyone for loving the arts, loving the city, and loving Vivian. He had always been better at gratitude than courage. Then Vivian took the microphone. She was beautiful when she performed. I'll give her that. Cream silk suit, pearl earrings, hair swept into a silver twist. She knew how to pause before a laugh and lower her voice before a wound. She thanked the museum director, the donors, the youth orchestra, the caterers, her children, and the families who understand what it means to protect a name. Then her gaze found me. My stomach went still. "Of course," she said. "Not everyone who enters a family understands the cost of building one." The room shifted. Forks paused above plates. The orthodontist's wife looked down at her salad like it had suddenly become very interesting. Graham was standing near the podium. He looked at me, then at his mother, then at the floor. I should have known then. Welcome back to the Madeline Files, where quiet people finally get to tell the part everyone else tried to edit out. If you have ever been treated like the extra chair, the emergency contact, the backup plan, or the person who is only family when something needs fixing, stay with me. This is not a story about shouting louder than the people who hurt you. It is about what happens when a woman lets the proof speak in the room where the lie was safest. I was not born into rooms like the Harrington glass house. I grew up in a brick duplex on Lark Street, where the upstairs neighbor worked nights, and the heat made a knocking sound every winter. My mother, Donna, was not cruel. She was overwhelmed in a way that made cruelty unnecessary. Bills piled on top of the microwave. School forms got lost under grocery flyers. My father left when I was 9, and after that I became the person who remembered due dates. By 11, I knew which envelopes could wait, and which ones made adults whisper. By 13, I was calling the electric company and pretending my mother was in the bathroom. By 16, I had a spiral notebook with columns for rent, gas, groceries, insurance, field trips, and the dentist we could not afford unless we skipped cable for 2 months. I did not think of it as trauma then. I thought of it as being helpful. My mother used to say, "Mira's my steady girl." It sounded loving until I realized steady meant I was not allowed to fall. I was good with numbers because numbers did not change their story depending on who was in the room. A missing amount stayed missing. A payment either cleared or it didn't. A signature either matched or it didn't. That steadiness comforted me, and later it became my work. I studied accounting on scholarships and part-time jobs. I learned tax code in library corners and ate vending machine pretzels for dinner during finals. After college, I worked in audit, then fraud review, then nonprofit recovery. By 30, I had a small firm downtown with my name on frosted glass. Kessler Forensic Accounting. Just me, a shared receptionist, 2 file cabinets, and eventually Marisol Vega, who came in as a temp and became the first person I trusted with both my client calendar and my real face. Marisol was 5 feet tall, wore red reading glasses, and could detect panic through drywall. "You say fine, like someone just set the building on fire," she told me my 2nd month of business ownership. "I'm okay," I said. She pointed at the printer, which had been making a grinding sound for 10 minutes. "That machine is screaming for help, and you're identifying with it." That was Marisol. I met Graham at a charity compliance seminar, which sounds exactly as romantic as it was. He was there representing the Alden Family Arts Foundation. I was presenting on restricted gifts, donor reporting, and the unpleasant things that happen when boards treat nonprofit money like a family checking account. Graham asked good questions afterward. He was tall, gentle-looking, with brown hair that fell forward when he listened. He laughed at himself easily. He told me he hated public speaking and loved old movie theaters. On our 3rd date, he took me to one that still had velvet curtains and a balcony, and he brought chocolate-covered almonds because I had mentioned once that popcorn made me thirsty. I liked that he remembered. Back then, I mistook remembering details for being brave with them. The Aldens were not old-money wealthy in the way movies show it. They were newer than they wanted people to know, and older than they admitted. Graham's grandfather had made money in commercial real estate. Vivian had turned that money into social position with museum boards, foundation luncheons, and dinners where no one said price out loud. The first time Graham brought me to his parents' house, Vivian opened the front door before we rang. Their house sat behind a low stone wall in Bellwether Heights, with hydrangeas trimmed into obedient circles and porch lanterns that looked expensive, even in daylight. "Mira," Vivian said, holding my name like she was testing the weight of it. "Graham has told us you're an accountant." "Forensic accountant," Graham said. Vivian's smile did not move. "How nice. Numbers are very steady work." Arthur shook my hand with both of his. Celeste arrived late and said, "I hope you don't mind casual. while wearing cashmere and earrings that probably cost more than my first car. Dinner was roast chicken, wild rice, green beans with almonds, and conversation that kept skimming over me like I was a table arrangement. Vivian asked where I went to school, then asked if my mother still lived in that neighborhood. Celeste asked if I had ever been to St. Bart's, then laughed softly when I asked whether she meant the island or the church. Graham touched my knee under the table. "She doesn't mean anything by it," he said in the car later. That became his family motto. "Mom doesn't mean anything by it. Celeste is just protective. Dad hates conflict. You know how they are." I did know how they were. That was the problem. At our wedding, Vivian wore pale silver and cried during the mother-son dance as if Graham had been shipped overseas. She gave a toast about legacy and roots. She called me a practical addition to the family, which people laughed at because Vivian made it sound charming. Aunt Ruth sat beside my mother and did not laugh. After the reception, while I was changing out of my dress, Aunt Ruth pressed the cobalt clutch into my hands. It had a tiny silver clasp, already loose then, and a lining that smelled faintly like powder and peppermint. "For when they make you feel plain," she said. "They don't," I said too quickly. She gave me the look that older women give when they love you enough not to argue. Aunt Ruth died 8 months later from a stroke that came on a Tuesday morning while she was watering basil in her kitchen window. I kept the clutch wrapped in tissue on the top shelf of my closet. I did not use it much, but I liked knowing it was there. Vivian's dismissals got sharper after the wedding because she no longer had to pretend I might leave. She did not insult me every time. That would have been too easy. Sometimes she was generous. She sent flowers to my office after I won a difficult case. She invited my mother to Thanksgiving once and seated her beside a retired Judge Hudge who talked about golf for 2 hours. She gave me a cashmere scarf for Christmas in a shade of gray she said was, "For work, since you like practical things." Then, 2 weeks later, she would ask Graham in front of me whether my clients paid on time, as if my business were a lemonade stand. I learned to smile without showing teeth. Graham hated tension. That was how I explained him for years. Not weak, not selfish, just allergic to conflict. If Vivian corrected me, he would change the subject. If Celeste made a joke, he would squeeze my hand. If Arthur sat silent while I was cut out of a family photo, Graham would say later, "I'll talk to them." I do not know if he ever did. There were nice moments too. That is what made it hard to see clearly. Vivian sent soup when I had the flu. Arthur remembered that I liked black coffee. Sisette once brought me a scarf from Milan, then ruined it by saying, "It's simple enough for you." Graham and I had whole weekends where the Aldens did not come up, and in those hours, I could pretend marriage was only the 2 people inside it. But family has a way of entering the room, even when no one opens the door. The Alden Family Arts Foundation was Vivian's favorite mirror. It funded youth music classes, small theater grants, museum school scholarships, and an annual gala that produced more photographs than actual policy. Graham worked there as director of community programs. Celeste chaired events without an official title. Arthur signed what Vivian put in front of him. I did not work for them. Vivian liked to say that often. "We keep family and business separate," she would say at dinners, usually after asking me a question about donor restrictions or payroll classifications. Still, she calls me when something confused her. Could she classify a donor lunch as development? Was a pledge the same as cash for budgeting? How late could a quarterly report be before it looked bad? I answered because Graham asked me to, then because staff would be affected, then because saying no felt like starting a war over 20 minutes of my time. Useful work rarely announces when it becomes exploitation. It just keeps arriving in smaller envelopes. The first time I noticed something wrong, it was at a Sunday brunch at Vivian's house. Celeste was talking about a new donor who had given money specifically for after-school violin lessons in Westbrook. Vivian said, "We have flexibility, dear. The arts are the arts." I looked up from my coffee. "Restricted gifts usually aren't flexible," I said. The room went quiet. Celeste smiled. "Here we go. I'm not criticizing," I said. "I just mean if the donor restricted it in writing, The funds have to follow that purpose. Vivian folded her napkin. That's very helpful, Mira. But not every family conversation needs a compliance seminar. Graham looked at me with tired eyes, and I did what I had been trained by 2 families to do. I stopped talking. The night everything began, I was in my office late because a children's literacy nonprofit had found 3 years of messy grant reporting and needed the kind of help that does not fit into normal business hours. It was September 15th. Rain had been tapping against the windows since dinner. Marisol had gone home but left a sandwich in the office fridge with a sticky note that said, "Eat before you become an audit ghost." My phone buzzed at 11:39. Vivian. I let it ring because Vivian did not call me that late unless she wanted something she did not want. Written down. Then it rang again. Then Graham called. I picked up. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Mom's trying to reach you. Is someone hurt?" "No, not exactly. Can you just talk to her?" "She's upset." "What happened?" A pause. "I don't know all the details." That sentence should have alarmed me more than it did. Graham often did not know all the details when the details were inconvenient. Vivian called again while I was still holding the phone. Then a text appeared. "Please pick up. This concerns Graham." I stared at the words for a few seconds before answering. "Mira," Vivian said, and her voice was not polished. It was thin and breathless. "Thank God." "What's wrong?" "I need discretion." Not hello, not sorry for the hour. Discretion. Rain slid down my office window in crooked lines. I reached for a pen. "Tell me what happened." "It's a timing problem," she said. "A short-term cash flow problem. The foundation has incoming pledges, but certain obligations are due Monday, and the bank is being difficult." "What obligations?" "Vendors, payroll, some museum commitments." "How much?" She inhaled sharply. "I'd rather not discuss numbers over the phone. Then I can't help you." That was the first time I heard Vivian Alden swallow pride, and even then she did it like medicine she planned to blame me for later. She gave me figures, not all of them, enough for me to know it was not a timing problem. Timing problems are when money exists but arrives late. This sounded like money had been used somewhere it should not have gone. "Send me the ledger," I said. "I can't send foundation documents to an outside person, then call your treasurer." "Elliot is old-fashioned," she said quickly. "He'll overreact. Then call your bank." "Mira, please," there it was. The word she never used unless no one else could hear it. "Please." She sent a spreadsheet 20 minutes later. No email subject, no explanation. Just a file called September Working Copy. I opened it on my desktop, turned on my second monitor, and felt my body change into the version of me that did not have feelings until the columns balanced. The vendor lines were incomplete. 2 gala deposits were overdue. Payroll was due Monday morning. 3 donor-restricted amounts had been moved into general operations and replaced with expected pledges, which were not cash. There were handwritten notes in the margins of the scan. Celeste's initials appeared beside 2 transfers. At 12:18, I called Vivian back. "This is not a cash flow problem. You don't know the full picture. I know enough. You have always been so dramatic about forms." "Vivian." Silence, I said. "If restricted funds were used for operating expenses, the board needs to know. If payroll fails, employees will know. If vendors aren't paid, the Harrington contract could be suspended." Her voice dropped. "That cannot happen. Then you need to call Elliot." I already did. That was when I noticed the first real crack. She had called the treasurer before calling me, which meant she was not looking for advice. She was looking for a solution Elliot would not approve. "What did he say?" I asked. "He said the board needs an emergency meeting." And I am not letting one clerical panic damage 40 years of family work. Clerical panic. That was what she called numbers when they disagreed with her. I should have hung up. I should have told Graham his mother needed counsel, not a daughter-in-law. Instead, I looked at the payroll line and thought about staff who had nothing to do with Vivian's pride. I thought about Graham's program assistants. I thought about the youth orchestra kids who would lose classes if the foundation froze. I thought about how many innocent people stand near a family when that family starts to fall. By 1:15 in the morning, I had Marisol on the phone. She answered with, "Who died?" "No one. I need you to remote into the office server." "You sound too calm." "I hate that." "I need a folder created. Alden emergency, date stamped, restricted access." There was a pause, then bed creaking, then her voice changed. "Printed, saved, and backed up." "Which version do you want in the envelope?" That was Marisol. She did not ask me to prove the fire before bringing water. At 2:04, I called the Harrington Glasshouse vendor number from an old contract Vivian forwarded. I expected voicemail. Instead, a woman answered. "This is Leticia. I'm sorry for calling so late," I said. "My name is Mira Alden. I'm calling regarding the Alden Foundation account." A pause. "Are we getting paid?" No greeting, no society softness. Just the question that mattered. "I'm trying to understand the status." "I don't need gossip," she said. "I need to know if my staff is getting paid." Her voice had no patience for Vivian's language. It steadied me. "I'm working on it," I said, "Mrs. Alden told my office the wire was sent last week." "It wasn't, I know." That was how I met Leticia Ramos. She sent me the outstanding invoices. Not because she trusted me fully, but because she trusted the truth more than the Aldens' promises. One invoice had been marked paid in Vivian's spreadsheet. It had not been paid. I printed that one twice and stared at the discrepancy long enough for the printer to go quiet. I didn't understand yet why that invoice would matter. By morning, Elliot Park agreed to meet me in my office. He was a small, tidy man in a navy raincoat, retired from public accounting, with silver hair and the sad patience of someone who had warned people before and been ignored. He reviewed the spreadsheet, the vendor emails, the payroll report, and the donor restrictions. He took off his glasses. "This is not a bookkeeping mistake," he said. "This is a board problem." "I know. Does Vivian?" "She knows enough to be scared." He looked at me for a long moment. "And what does she want from you?" I did not answer right away, because by then I knew. Vivian wanted money that could arrive faster than an emergency board meeting. Quiet money, clean money, money without questions attached. She wanted me to bridge the gap, protect the gala contract, cover payroll, prevent donor scrutiny, and then disappear from the story. Elliot said, "If you put personal funds into this, it must be documented as a recoverable loan, not a gift, not family help, a formal repayment obligation." Vivian will hate that. Vivian will hate exposure more. He was right. At 9:30 that morning, Graham came to my office. He looked exhausted, hair damp from rain, tie crooked. For 1 second, I saw the man from the old theater with chocolate almonds. He stood in my doorway and said, "Thank you." I waited. He rubbed his face. "Mom is spiraling. Your foundation has a serious problem." "I know. Do you?" His eyes flicked to the folders on my desk. "I know it's bad," he said. "Graham, restricted money was moved. Vendors were told wires were sent when they weren't. Payroll could fail Monday." He sat down slowly. "Celis said it was just a temporary reallocation. Celis should not be using that phrase." He winced. "Can you fix it?" There it was. Not "can we fix it?" Not "what do we need to disclose?" "Can you?" I looked at my husband, and I wish I could tell you I saw the whole future right there. I didn't. I saw men scared for his job, his family name, his mother's approval, and maybe somewhere under all that me. "I can help stabilize it," I said, "but not hide it." He nodded too. "Of course." That afternoon, Vivian came to my office for the first and only time before the gala night. She wore camel wool and pearls, as if dressing properly could make improper things disappear. She looked around my waiting area, at the framed license on the wall, the old coffee machine, the shelves of binders. "It's smaller than I imagined," she said. "I need you to sign this." I placed the emergency repayment agreement on the conference table. Elliot had drafted the essential language. The funds would be advanced by me personally, treated as a bridge loan, used only for listed obligations, repaid according to schedule, and disclosed to the board treasurer. Vivian read the first page, then looked up. "This makes it sound like we're borrowing something from you." "You are." Her face tightened. "Mira, this is family." "No," I said, "this is foundation money. Family is why I'm still in the room." Elliot's pen rested beside the signature line. Marisol stood near the copier, pretending not to listen while hearing every word. Vivian signed. Arthur signed later, quietly, with a hand that shook. Graham signed as foundation representative. Elliot witnessed. Celeste did not sign, though her initials lived in the spreadsheet like fingerprints. Then I wired the funds. I will not tell you the amount yet, because that was never the first wound. The first wound was what happened afterward. Payroll cleared. Vendors were paid. The Harrington account stayed open. The donor reports were corrected enough to avoid immediate disaster. Elliot pushed for a board review. Vivian delayed, softened, reframed. A few months later, Elliot resigned. Graham said he was tired. Celeste said the whole thing had been an overreaction by numbers people. The repayment schedule started with 2 transfers, then stopped. When I asked Graham, he said, "I'll talk to Mom." When I asked Vivian, she said, "We are still recovering from the embarrassment of that period." The embarrassment. As if the embarrassment had been caused by the person who kept the checks from bouncing. I kept every record. That was not revenge. That was my job. The voicemail export, the call log, the signed agreement, the wire confirmations, the vendor receipts, the corrected ledger, the email from Leticia at 3:12 in the morning saying, "Received. Thank you. My staff can breathe now." I kept them in a folder labeled Alden Emergency. For 2 years, that folder slept in my system. But stories do not sleep just because documents do. Vivian began rewriting the crisis almost immediately. First, she called it a temporary strain, then a clerical mess, then an unfortunate moment when certain people panicked. By the next spring, she was telling donors that the Aldens had personally sacrificed to protect the arts during a difficult season. At a family dinner, Celeste raised a glass and said, "Honestly, Mother carried the foundation on her back that year." Graham looked at his plate. I looked at him. He knew enough to correct it. He did not. That night, in our bathroom, while he brushed his teeth, I said, "Why didn't you say anything?" He rinsed and avoided the mirror. "It wasn't the time." "When is the time?" "Mira, do we have to litigate every dinner?" I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because litigate was what guilty people called memory when it arrived with teats. He turned toward me. "I'm not the enemy." "No," I said. "You're the hallway everyone uses to avoid the room." He looked hurt, and I felt guilty for hurting him. That was how it always worked. Someone harmed me. I named it too clearly, and suddenly I was responsible for the bruise my words left on them. The gala invitation arrived 3 months after that dinner, a ruby night for the arts, 40 years of Vivian and Arthur, 30 years of the foundation, 200 guests, local press, youth orchestra performance, donor pledge announcement, dinner, dancing, legacy toast. Graham put the envelope on the kitchen island like it was a peace offering. "Mom wants us there early for photos." "Does she?" she specifically asked. "Why?" He loosened his tie. "Because your family." I looked at the invitation. My name was handwritten on the inner envelope by someone with beautiful penmanship. Mira Kessler, not Alden. I ran my finger over the ink. Graham saw it. I know he did. His eyes dropped, then moved away. "It's probably just the calligrapher," he said. "Probably. Please don't make this a thing." I looked at my husband, tired in his blue work shirt, and felt something inside me step back. There is a moment when hope does not die loudly. It just stops making appointments. I said, "I'll go." He exhaled like I had given him something. I had. Just not what he thought. The week before the gala, Vivian invited me to lunch at the club. She had never invited me to lunch without Graham. I went because curiosity is useful, and because by then I had started trusting my discomfort. The club dining room smelled like lemon oil and old flowers. Vivian sat at a corner table beneath a painting of a fox hunt, though she claimed to hate anything involving horses. She ordered iced tea for both of us before I arrived. "I want Saturday to be smooth," she said. "So do I." Her fingers rested on the stem of her water glass. "There will be donors there who don't understand family nuances." "Family nuances?" "You and Graham have seemed tense." "That's between me and Graham." "Of course," she smiled. "But marriage into a family like ours requires perspective." I looked at her. She continued. "Sometimes people come from uncertainty, and they mistake stability for something owed." I did not answer right away. Vivian mistook silence for permission. "You have done well for yourself," she said. "No one denies that. But Graham has responsibilities beyond one person's feelings." "What responsibilities?" "To his family, to the name, to the foundation." I placed my napkin on my lap slowly. "Is there something you want to ask me?" Her smile thinned. "I want you not to embarrass him." That was the lunch. No food had arrived yet. I stood. Vivian looked surprised. "Mira, I have a client call. It's noon. It's urgent." She laughed softly. "Everything is urgent when you want to avoid grace." I left anyway. In the parking lot, I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel. Not crying, not shaking. Just listening to the tiny clicks of cooling metal under the hood. Then I called Marisol. "Do you still have the old Alden emergency archive?" She did not ask which one. "Yes. I need a clean copy of the voicemail export, the signed agreement, wire confirmations, and the Harrington vendor receipts." A pause. "Are we printing or praying?" "Printing." "Good," she said. "Prayer has terrible insing." That made me despite myself. By Friday afternoon, Marisol had prepared a slim charcoal folder with labeled tabs: voicemail transcript, call log agreement, wire records, vendor confirmations, board correspondence. She also saved the audio file to a clean drive and to my phone under a name no one would notice: Alden After Hours Vendor Call. She placed the folder on my desk, then set a phone charger on top. "Just in case. I may not use it. I know. I don't want to hurt the foundation. I know. I don't want to humiliate anyone." Marisol leaned against the doorway. "Mira, you're not the one booking a ballroom." That sentence stayed with me too. Graham came home late that night. I was in our bedroom with the cobalt clutch on the bed, trying to decide if I should carry it or choose the black satin one Vivian had given me for Christmas. The black one matched my dress. The cobalt one matched nothing and felt like Aunt Ruth's hand on my shoulder. Graham leaned against the doorframe. "That one?" he asked. I touched the beads. "Yes." He nodded, then looked away. "Mom's nervous," he said. "About what?" "Attendance. Donor stuff. You know." "I know donor stuff." He smiled weakly. "That's not what I meant." I waited. He crossed the room and sat at the edge of the bed. For a second, he looked younger than 40. "After tomorrow, I'll make her stop." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means I know she's been hard on you." "Hard on me." He rubbed his palms together. "Unfair." That word was so small I almost pitied it. "Graham, she's been lying about me." He looked up fast. "I wouldn't say lying." "What would you say?" Reframing. I stared at him until he heard himself. He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." It was the closest he had come. My heart moved toward him out of habit. That old reflex. That old hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe he would say, "I know what you did. I know what my mother did. I should have protected you. I should have told the truth." Instead, he said, "Just get through tomorrow night, please, for me." The hope stopped moving. I picked up the cobalt clutch and checked the clasp. "I'll get through it," I said. On the evening of the gala, the Harrington glass house glowed like a jewelry box. Valet attendants moved under heat lamps. Women in velvet and silk stepped carefully from cars. Men laughed too loudly near the entrance, already softened by champagne. Through the glass walls, I could see round tables set with ivory linens and low arrangements of red ranunculus. The string quartet was tuning near a marble staircase. Graham and I arrived at 6:12. I remember because the dashboard clock changed as he turned off the car. He did not reach for my hand right away. Inside, Vivian was posing for photographs with Arthur and Celeste. The backdrop behind them read Alden Legacy Gala in gold letters. Vivian saw Graham first. Her whole face warmed. Then she saw me, and the warmth became something managed. "Mira," she said, "you look appropriate. Thank you." Her eyes flicked to the clutch. Still carrying that sweet little bag. Still. Arthur kissed us my cheek. "Good to see you, Mira." He meant it, I think. But meaning something softly had never helped me much in that family. Celeste arrived with her husband, Daniel, who had the permanent expression of a man checking stock prices in his head. She wore diamonds at her ears and a red satin dress that photographed well from every angle. "Mira," she said, "we're all on our best behavior tonight, right? Are we?" She blinked, then laughed as if I had made a joke. At the check-in table, I found my place card, Mira Kessler. Table 12, said Graham Alden. Head table. I held both cards for 1 second. Graham said, "That's weird." I gave him his card. "Yes," I said, "it is." He looked around, then leaned close. "I'll fix it after dinner." "After dinner?" "I can't deal with seating right now." "Of course not." Seating was never just seating. It was a map of who mattered. I walked to table 12 alone. The room filled slowly. Donors kissed cheeks. Board members compared vacation homes. The youth orchestra students sat near the side entrance with their instruments, whispering nervously and trying not to touch the dessert forks. I recognized the museum director, 2 city council members, and a society columnist named June Bell, who had once written that Vivian Alden possessed a rare humility in philanthropy. I wondered what Vivian had served her for lunch. Then I saw Elliot Park. He sat near the back, at table 19, beside a retired judge and a woman in green velvet. He looked older than he had in my office 2 years earlier, but just as tidy. Navy suit, silver tie, hands folded. He saw me looking and gave one small nod. I had not invited him. I did not know he would be there. That detail changed the air around me. Before dinner, Leticia Ramos passed behind my table with a headset clipped to her black jacket. She stopped just long enough to adjust a water glass that did not need adjusting. "Mrs. Alden," she said quietly. "Leticia." Her eyes moved to Vivian across the room, then back to me. "Everything all right?" I almost said yes. Instead, I said, "Not sure yet." She nodded once. "I'm nearby. No speech, no drama, just nearby." That was more than my husband had managed all week. Dinner began at 7:15. Beet salad, short ribs, roasted carrots, rolls placed with silver tongs. Vivian had chosen a red wine from the year she and Arthur married. The program listed performances, pledge announcements, and anniversary toasts. Graham's name appeared under community programs. Celeste appeared under gala leadership. Mine appeared nowhere, which was accurate in one sense and dishonest in another. At 7:43, my phone buzzed inside the cobalt clutch. Marisol, coat check. Left side. Brought flats too because those shoes looked like a lawsuit. I looked across the room and saw her near the entrance in a black wrap dress, holding a garment bag over one arm. She lifted 2 fingers. I had not asked her to come inside. I texted back, "You didn't have to." She replied, "Correct." I put the phone away before Graham could see me smile. The first half of the evening went as planned. The youth orchestra played. A 14-year-old violinist missed one note and recovered beautifully. Arthur gave his soft toast. Celeste introduced a donor pledge with a voice full of ownership. Trams spoke briefly about children deserving access to art, and for 3 minutes, I remembered why I had fallen in love with him. He believed in that work. He did. Belief just did not make him brave. Then Vivian took the microphone. She thanked everyone. She touched Arthur's shoulder. She praised Celeste's taste, Graham's heart, the board's stewardship, the donor's generosity. She spoke about 40 years of marriage, as if it had been one long ribbon of devotion, not a house where everyone learned which doors not to open. Then she said, "Family is not only who joins your table. Family is who understands what that table cost." My fingers closed around the clutch. At first, people smiled politely. They thought she was moving into something sentimental. A mother reflecting on legacy, a wife honoring sacrifice. Vivian turned slightly toward me. "There are times," she said, "when people enter established families and mistake kindness for entitlement." The room cooled. I felt the orthodontist's wife beside me stop breathing for a second. Graham stood near the podium, half in shadow. He knew. Maybe not the exact words, but he knew the direction and he did not move. Vivian continued, "As many of you know, our family has always believed in generosity. We open our homes, our hearts, our resources, but generosity can be exploited, and silence sometimes is mistaken for consent." That last word almost made me laugh. Silence had been the Aldens' favorite currency. Celeste lowered her eyes with the delicate sadness of someone enjoying herself. Vivian's voice softened. "I have watched my son carry burdens that were never his to carry. I have watched a person benefit from the Alden name while showing little respect for what that name represents." Someone at table 8 whispered, Oh my God. I looked at Graham. He looked at the floor. My body wanted to protect him even then. That embarrasses me now. My first instinct was still to think, this must be hard for him. Not, this is being done to me, and he is allowing it. Vivian held the microphone with both hands. I will not stand here tonight, celebrating 40 years of marriage, and pretend that marriage is always entered for love. Sometimes people marry for access, for comfort, for money. Then she looked directly at Graham. She married you for the money, Graham. The room made a sound without making a sound. A shift of chairs, a glass touching a plate, someone's quiet inhale. Vivian looked at me. She's a fraud. 200 people did not gasp the way movies pretend they do. Real rooms are worse. Real rooms go still and curious. They wait to see who has permission to react. I felt heat rise up my neck. My hands were cold. The broken clasp of the cobalt clutch pressed into the soft skin below my thumb. The art dealer at my table looked away. The orthodontist's wife whispered, I'm so sorry, but she did not say it loudly enough for anyone else to hear. Vivian was not finished. You came here empty-handed, Mira, she said, and now her voice had the sorrowful firmness she used when dismissing caterers. And somehow you still think you're owed a seat. A few people laughed. Not many. Enough. That was the sentence. I looked at Graham one more time. He lifted his eyes, finally. His face was pale. He opened his mouth. Vivian said, Graham, sweetheart, there comes a time when a man must protect the family name. And he closed it. I remember noticing the red candle glass near my plate. The wax had melted unevenly, leaving a small bright pool at the center. I remember the smell of short ribs and perfume. I remember a server standing near the wall with a tray of untouched champagne, his jaw tight. I remember Letitia at the side entrance. Completely still, I did not stand yet. Vivian wanted the picture of me standing too soon, angry, trembling, protesting. She wanted me to become the kind of woman her story required. So I sat. She mistook that for defeat. This family has carried her long enough, Vivian said. That was her mistake, because until then she had insulted me. But with that sentence, she had moved from cruelty into a claim. A financial claim, a history claim, a claim made in front of donors, board members, staff, press, vendors, and witnesses. I opened the cobalt clutch. The clasp clicked louder than it should have. Graham saw my hand go inside. Celeste saw it too. Vivian did not. She was looking at the room now, drawing strength from discomfort. Every dollar represented here tonight, Vivian said, came from Alden's sacrifice, from Alden discipline, from Alden loyalty. We did not build this legacy so someone could walk in, take what she wanted, and call it belonging. I took out my phone. My pulse was steady now. Not because I was fearless, I was not. My knees felt strange under the table. My mouth was dry. But fear and clarity can exist in the same body. I stood. The room turned toward me with relief and dread. Now they had something to watch. Graham whispered, Mira, not loudly, not protectively, warningly. I walked between the tables, past the red flowers and the wine glasses, and the people who had come to honor generosity. My heels made soft sounds against the floor. Vivian watched me approach with a smile that said she believed I was about to embarrass myself exactly on schedule. At the podium, I stopped beside her. Up close, I could see powder settled in the fine lines near her mouth. Her hand tightened on the microphone. Mira, she said softly, still amplified because she forgot the mic was close. Don't make this worse. I looked at the audio technician, a young man with a head and frightened eyes. Can you connect my phone to the house speakers, please? A ripple moved through the room. Vivian laughed once. This is exactly the kind of scene I was trying to spare my son. I held out my phone to the technician. My hand did not shake. That surprised me. He looked at Vivian. Leticia appeared beside him. Connect it, she said. Vivian's head turned. Excuse me. Leticia's face was calm. The podium audio accepts line-in. The technician plugged in the cable. I did not press play yet. I turned toward Vivian. Do you remember calling me at 11:48 p.m. on September 15th, 2 years ago? Her expression did not collapse. Vivian was too practiced for that. It adjusted. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said. Are you sure? Her smile sharpened. I'm sure I have called you many times, Mira, usually to keep peace. Some people chuckled nervously. I looked at Graham. He stared at the phone. I said, "This one was after 3 missed calls and a text that said, 'Please pick up. This concerns Graham.'" Vivian's eyes changed then. "Not enough for the whole room to see, maybe. Enough for me," she said. "Private family communication should not be weaponized." I nodded once. Agreed. Then I pressed play. For 1 second, there was only static and the soft accidental sound of my office chair rolling against the floor from 2 years earlier. Then Vivian's voice filled the Harrington glass house. "Mira, thank God. I need discretion." The room went silent in a way it had not been silent before. Not curious, listening. My recorded voice asked, "What's wrong?" Vivian's voice came back, thin and urgent. "The foundation has obligations due Monday. Payroll, Harrington, the museum deposit. Graham cannot handle this right now, and Celeste's transfers have created exposure I do not have time to explain." Celeste's face went white. On the recording, I said, "Are you asking me for money?" A pause. Then Vivian's said, "I am asking you to protect this family before the press finds out we cannot meet our commitments. I will make sure it is repaid quietly. I just need you to do this tonight." No one moved. The youth orchestra students stared from the side wall. The society columnist lowered her champagne glass. Arthur closed his eyes. The recording continued for only a few more seconds. My voice said, "This needs to be documented." Vivian said, "Fine, document whatever you need. Just don't let the Alden name be dragged through this." I stopped the audio. The quiet afterward had weight. Vivian reached for the microphone, but I still had it angled toward me. "That was taken out of context," she said. I looked at her. "Which part?" Her mouth opened, no words came. I placed the slim charcoal folder on the podium. I did not wave it. I did not hold it high. I opened it to the second tab and turned the pages toward her. "This is the emergency repayment agreement signed the next afternoon. This is the call log. These are the wire confirmations to cover payroll and vendor obligations. These are the Harrington invoices marked unpaid after your office represented otherwise." Vivian whispered, "Mira." Now she used my name like a plea. From the back of the room, a chair moved. Elliot Park stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The room made space for him because his tone was the opposite of performance. "That is my signature on the second page," he said. "I advised the board to repay Mrs. Alden before accepting new pledges." Mrs. Alden. After a night of being made Mira Kessler, the name landed gently and sharply at once. Vivian turned toward him. "Elliot, this is not necessary." He looked tired. "It was necessary 2 years ago." Leticia stepped closer to the podium. Her hands were clasped in front of her black jacket. "I was banquet captain on the Harrington account that week," she said. "Mrs. Alden called after midnight, confirmed the unpaid invoices, and arranged payment before our staff payroll processed. The wire confirmation came from her office." Vivian's face flushed. Celeste stood halfway, then sat again when Daniel touched her arm. Graham had not moved. I looked down at the document. The signatures were all there. Vivian Alden, Arthur Alden, Graham Alden, Elliot Park as witness. Mine at the bottom, neat and small, because I had signed last. The dollar amount was there too. More than enough to make the phrase "gold digger" rot in the air. I did not say it out loud. I did not have to. June Bell was close enough to read the page when I turned it toward Vivian. So were 2 board members. So was Graham. Vivian reached for my wrist. I stepped back. Her hand closed on nothing. "This was a private matter," she said, no longer into the microphone. I lifted the mic slightly. "You made it public." Her lips trembled, but not with remorse. With calculation. I could see her searching for the next story. "Mira misunderstood," she said to the room. "We're trying to protect her. She was overwhelmed by the scale of our family obligations, and I should have been more careful with her feelings." There it was. The second performance of the night. Graham finally came toward me. "Mira," he said low. "Can we talk privately?" I looked at him. Now. His eyes were wet. "Please," that word again. Behind him, Vivian said, "We are still family." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because family, in her mouth, had always meant bring your checkbook and lower your voice. I handed the microphone back to the stand. I'm done speaking here, I said. Then I picked up the folder, unplugged my phone, and walked away from the podium. No one clapped. I am grateful for that. Applause would have made it feel like entertainment. What happened instead was better. People turned in their chairs and looked at Vivian without the soft filter she had spent decades building. The first visible consequence came before I reached table 12. A board member named Thomas Greer, who had toasted Vivian 20 minutes earlier, stood and walked to the museum director. They spoke in low voices. The society columnist was typing with both thumbs. One of the major donors, a woman in a blue velvet wrap, closed her checkbook and put it back in her bag. Small things, real things. At the side of the room, Marisol held my coat. She also held the flats because even on the worst night of my marriage, she remained practical. Nice audio quality, she said quietly. I made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost not. Graham caught up with me near the coat check. Don't leave like this, he said. How should I leave? He looked behind him. People were watching, which meant he could not use his usual soft avoidance. I didn't know she was going to say all that. But you knew she was going to say something. His face tightened. Mira, I froze. No, I said. You waited. He flinched. I was shocked. You were standing close enough to take the microphone. He looked toward his mother. Vivian was surrounded now by Arthur, Celeste, 2 board members, and the museum director. Her hands moved as she talked, still managing, still arranging the pieces. Graham said, "Don't make this our marriage." That hurt more than I expected. Maybe because after everything, he still believed our marriage was something separate from every silence he had placed inside it. It already was, I said. His eyes filled. My mom is impossible. You know that. Yes, I've spent my whole life trying to keep peace. I looked at the man I had loved. You kept peace with the wrong person. He lowered his head. There was an almost moment then, even after everything. I saw him look back at Vivian, then at me, and I thought maybe he would say the sentence I had waited years to hear. Can you just not involve lawyers tonight? That was the end of the almost. I put on my coat. Marisol handed me the flats. Letitia approached with a plain white takeout bag. I had the kitchen pack something, she said. You barely touched dinner. Inside were 2 rolls, slices of short rib, carrots, and a small container of butter. I do not know why that almost broke me. Maybe because everyone in my husband's family had talked about what I owed, and a woman who owed me nothing had noticed I had not eaten. Thank you, I said. Letitia nodded. You paid my people when it mattered. She did not say more. She did not need to. Arthur appeared before I reached the doors. His anniversary pin, a ruby-colored enamel thing Vivian had ordered for the family, was in his hand instead of on his lapel. Mira, he said. I stopped. His eyes were red. I should have said something. Yes, I said. He nodded, accepting it like a bill he had earned. I am sorry, I believed him. I also knew belief did not require me to stay. Behind him, Celeste's voice rose. This is being blown completely out of proportion. The museum director looked at her as if she had just coughed on a birthday cake. I walked out before Vivian could reach me. Outside, the night air was cold and smelled like rain on concrete. The valet stand glowed under orange heaters. Marisol put the garment bag over my shoulders while I changed into the flats beside a planter. My hands shook then, finally, but not enough to drop anything. You okay? She asked. No, good, that would have been weird. I leaned against the stone wall and breathed. Through the glass, I could see the gala continuing in broken pieces. People standing, staff moving carefully. Vivian at the center, no longer glowing, just bright in the wrong way. Graham near the doors, looking out at me, not coming closer. Marisol followed my gaze. You want me to drive? She asked. Yes, in the car I held the cobalt clutch in my lap. The silver clasp had left a crescent mark in my palm. Marisol drove without asking where to go. After a few blocks, she said, Office? I nodded. At the office. We sat on the floor in the conference room and ate the food Letitia packed from plastic containers with disposable forks. It was close to 10:30. My gala dress pooled around my knees. Marisol kicked off her heels and opened the folder to make sure every document was still there. "Of course you're checking it," I said. "Of course I am. I learned from the most irritating woman alive." My phone buzzed every few seconds. Graham. Vivian. Celeste. Graham again. Then an unknown number. Then my mother, who must have heard from someone. I turned the phone face down. Not because I was above caring. I cared. My chest hurt in a steady, humiliating way. I had been publicly attacked by my mother-in-law, failed by my husband, watched by 200 strangers, and fed by the banquet captain. My body did not know which part to process first. So I did what I knew how to do. I made a list. Immediate. Save backup copy of played audio. Tomorrow contact attorney. Monday. Formal notice regarding repayment agreement. Personal. Pack essentials. Marisol looked over my shoulder. Add sleep. That's not a task. It is if you're bad at it. I wrote sleep. The fallout began before sunrise. June Bell did not publish the audio. I was grateful for that. But she published enough. Her piece used phrases like unexpected financial disclosure and questions surrounding prior foundation obligations. She did not call Vivian a liar. Society writers rarely use blunt words when sharp ones will do. By 9, 3 donors had paused pledges pending review. By 10:30, Thomas Greer called an emergency board meeting. By noon, Elliott Park sent a written statement confirming his role in the repayment agreement and his resignation after concerns about governance were not addressed. At 1:15, my attorney Priya Nandakumar looked over the documents in her office and said, "This is cleaner than most marriages. I don't know whether to be proud or depressed. Both are available." Priya had short hair, rimless glasses, and no patience for family fog. She explained what would happen next. Formal demand for repayment, preservation notice, separation of personal finances. If Graham contested anything, the signatures would matter. If Vivian claimed coercion, the voicemail would matter. If Celeste tried to deny involvement, the spreadsheet initials would matter. "Do you want to pursue this aggressively?" Priya asked. "I want it pursued accurately." She nodded. "That I can do." Graham came to the apartment that evening. I had already packed 2 suitcases and Aunt Ruth's clutch, which I placed on top of a box labeled office books. He stood in the living room and looked at the open closet like he had not understood that leaving involved objects. "You're really doing this," he said. "Yes. One night, Mira." I turned from the dresser. "What?" "You're ending us over one night." I stared at him. Then I realized he needed it to be one night. One night could be forgiven. One night could be blamed on shock, wine, Vivian, stress, a bad speech, a misunderstanding. One night did not require him to examine every dinner where he let me be diminished and called it peace. "It wasn't one night," I said. He sat on the edge of the sofa. "I love you. I know. That was the cruelest part. I believed he loved me in the way he understood love. He loved me when loving me did not require disappointing Vivian. He loved me in private, in dark movie theaters, and quiet kitchens and Sunday mornings with coffee. But he did not love me enough to stand beside me in the room where his silence had an audience. He said, "Mom wants to apologize." "No, she doesn't. She's scared. That's different." He pressed his palms to his eyes. "She might lose everything." "No, she might lose what she used me to keep." His shoulders shook once. I almost sat beside him. My body remembered comforting him. My hand even moved. Then I stopped. "I can't rescue you from the consequences of not rescuing me," I said. That was one of the few sentences I had to say plainly, because he was still looking for a softer door. He left without taking anything except the framed photo from our trip to Maine. I let him have it. The emergency board meeting happened 3 days later. I was not there. Priya was. Elliott was. Vivian was asked to step down from any foundation role pending independent review. Celeste's expected appointment to gala chair was withdrawn. The board hired an outside firm to review restricted funds from the prior 3 years. Donor communications went out with careful language and no adjectives. Vivian hated careful language when it was not hers. She called me 11 times that week. I answered once, with Priya present. "Mira," Vivian said, voice soft, almost maternal, "this has gone too far." I looked at Priya. She made a small note on her legal pad. Vivian continued, I know you felt hurt. I know my words were sharp. But you must understand, I was trying to protect Graham from confusion. Confusion about loyalty, about intentions. You have always been sensitive around money. I closed my eyes. Even then, she reached for the old script. I want us to sit down as women, she said. No attorneys, no outsiders, just family. Priya slid a note toward me. Do not agree to private meeting. I almost smiled. Vivian, I said. All communication about repayment goes through counsel. This is not about repayment. It is now. Her breath hitched. Then the softness vanished. You are making a terrible mistake. No, I said. I'm documenting the old one. I ended the call. There were other messages. Celeste sent one that said, I hope you're proud of humiliating an elderly woman on her anniversary. Arthur sent one that said, I will cooperate with the review. Graham sent many, most of them beginning with, can we just talk? I did talk to him eventually, in a mediator's office with beige walls and a table too wide for pretending closeness. He looked thinner. He had stopped shaving every day. I felt sad for him. I did not feel responsible for fixing that sadness. He said I should have stopped her. Yes. I thought if I stayed neutral, it wouldn't get worse. You were not neutral. He looked at me then, really looked. I think that was when he finally understood that silence had taken a side, and it had not been mine. The repayment issue resolved faster than the marriage. Money is often simpler than grief. Vivian could fight publicly and invite discovery, or the family could settle the obligation quietly, with interest and governance conditions attached. They chose quiet, not out of decency, out of strategy. I accepted the repayment because it was owed, not because it healed anything. The check cleared on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office when Marisol brought in the confirmation. She placed it on my desk without flourish. There, she said, the ghost has a receipt. I looked at the number for a long time. Then I opened the old Alden emergency folder, added the confirmation, and closed it. For the first time in 2 years, the folder felt finished. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment 8 blocks from my office. It had uneven floors, tall windows, and a radiator that hissed like it had opinions. The kitchen was small enough that I could reach the sink, stove, and fridge without moving my feet. I loved it immediately. My mother came to help me unpack and kept saying, I never liked how that woman talked to you, which was not entirely true, but was kind enough that I let it stand. She folded towels while I lined up coffee mugs. Are you okay? She asked. I looked around at the boxes, the cheap lamp, the stack of client files near the oar, the cobalt clutch, sitting on the windowsill, because I had not decided where it belonged yet. I'm getting there. That answer was honest. 2 weeks after I moved, Vivian appeared at my office. Marisol called from the front desk. Weather alert in pearls. I almost told her to send Vivian away. Then I thought of all the rooms where Vivian had controlled the entrance. Conference room, I said. Door open. Vivian entered wearing navy, not cream. Less gala, more widow, though Arthur was very much alive. She looked smaller in my office than she had in the glass house. Or maybe I had stopped shrinking the room for her. Mira, Vivian. She looked toward Marisol's desk. Must she listen? Yes. Her mouth tightened. I came to say I regret what happened. That's not an apology. She inhaled through her nose. I regret what I said. That's closer. I was under enormous pressure. I know. You cannot understand what it is like to hold a family together. I let the silence sit there. Her eyes moved to the framed license on my wall, then to the file cabinets, then to me. I did not come here to fight, she said. Then don't. Her face changed, and for one brief second, I saw the woman from the voicemail, not the polished chairwoman. The frightened woman who knew exactly whom to call when the story broke. I need you to ask Graham to attend the board reception next month, she said. The family should appear united. There it was, not remorse. Logistics. I stood. This meeting is over. Mira, don't be childish. Marisol's chair creaked outside the open door. Vivian saw my expression and stopped. I walked her to the front. At the elevator, she turned back. You were never comfortable in our world, she said. I thought about the gala, the clutch, the microphone. the way 200 people had waited to see whether I would break. No, I said. I was never comfortable being useful and unwelcome. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, then turned as if she wanted the last word. I gave it to her before she could. I didn't come empty-handed, Vivian. I just stopped handing you everything. The doors closed on her face. I did not feel triumphant. I felt quiet. There is a difference. The final papers with Graham took months, because endings have schedules, even when your heart is already gone. He wrote me one real letter during that time. Not a text, not an email. A letter in his uneven handwriting on plain paper. He said he was sorry for every time he had asked me to understand people who were not trying to understand me. He said he had confused peace with postponement. He said he did not expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know he had started therapy, which I mention only because he used the word started, not changed. I kept the letter. I did not go back. By spring, the Alden Gala photos had disappeared from the foundation website. Vivian's name moved from chair to past leadership. Celeste joined another committee somewhere less visible. Arthur began attending board meetings alone. Leticia's staff kept working. The youth programs continued because the independent review did what Vivian never wanted done. It separated the work from the family performance. That part mattered to me. I never wanted children to lose music lessons because adults misused money and called it legacy. One Friday in April, Marisol invited Leticia and me to dinner at a small diner near my apartment, the kind with chrome stools, laminated menus, and pie rotating in a glass case. Leticia came after a long shift, hair pulled back, black jacket folded over her arm. Marisol brought a bottle of grocery store sparkling cider, because the diner did not serve alcohol, and she said champagne had been, emotionally, compromised. I carried the cobalt clutch. The clasp had finally been repaired properly by a shoe repairman on 9th Street who said, "Good beads," like he was appraising a diamond. We sat in a booth by the window, table 6. Marisol ordered fries for the table without asking. Leticia asked about my new apartment and remembered that I hated mushrooms. No one asked me to explain the Aldens. No one needed me to prove the story again. At one point, I opened the clutch to pay for pie and saw what was inside. My apartment key, a lip balm, a folded receipt from the shoe repair shop, and nothing that could save anyone else from their own choices. I closed it gently. Marisol noticed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. But it was not nothing. For years, I had carried emergency things, backup documents, chargers, receipts, proof. The little tools of a woman trained to be ready when other people denied the fire. Now I was carrying a key. When dinner ended, Leticia insisted on paying the tip because, as she put it, "I know what restaurant math looks like." Marisol walked me home, even though it was 4 blocks out of her way. My apartment windows were glowing from the lamp I had left on. Not a chandelier, not a glass house. Just one warm square of light on the 2nd floor. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and looked up at it. Graham texted once that night. "I hope you're well." I did not answer. Not because I hated him, I didn't. Missing someone does not mean returning to the place that taught you to disappear. I went upstairs, unlocked my door, set the cobalt clutch on the small table by the window, and made tea. The radiator hissed. A neighbor laughed somewhere through the wall. My phone stayed quiet. For the first time in a long time, quiet did not feel like waiting for the next demand. It felt like mine. That's my story. The cobalt clutch, the words empty-handed, and a new key on a plain brass ring. If someone in your life only values you when you are useful, pay attention to what happens when you stop performing rescue. You do not have to make a scene to leave one. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is keep the receipt, tell the truth once, and let the locked door stay locked. If this story found you at the right time, tell me where you're listening from. And subscribe to the Madeline Files for more stories about quiet people who finally stopped carrying families that refused to carry them.